Hello, everyone. Today we have a guest on our podcast. We have Ifan, and he's an entrepreneur, a designer, a very bright guy, and I'm very happy to have him on this particular platform. He has invited me into his condo, so we're going to have a nice talk. I hope you guys will like it. So we're going directly to Mr. Ifan. Can you present yourself a little bit?
So I am a Chinese national who just finished his journey in the overseas for about 14 to 15 years. I just came back to Nanjing, a city where I grew up with, and I was born in Inner Mongolia. So I had a quite interesting background.
Okay.
And here I am, back in Nanjing from New Zealand after 14 years, trying to establish something on my own, trying to give myself a new identity. At the same time, learn from my surroundings.
That's great. That's great. I've known you in our club, in our philosophy club, and I was pretty the first time I was pretty impressed by your level of English. It was absolutely off the charts. It's very difficult to see somebody who knows how to speak English like that. And based on your background, you said that you were in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So you studied there for 14 years.
Not really. I was also working there. So I established a career back in New Zealand. I would say it's my second home.
Okay.
And, I'm also a resident of New Zealand, and people back there in New Zealand would consider me a Kiwi, regardless of, my origin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when did you go there then? When did you arrive in New Zealand?
I think it was year 2009.
So you were basically here in China before?
Yep. Never been to any other country.
Okay.
Yeah.
At that time, how old were you?
I was 18.
So 18, you went to New Zealand.
Yep.
And at that time, what was your English already that good, or?
No.
Really?
No.
So when you arrive into a new place where you have to start learning English.
Pretty much. I'll say my level of English was absolutely chaotic and not functional. But good enough for me to order, Big Mac from McDonald's. That's it.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
So you arrive in New Zealand and you go directly into university.
No, I did language school
okay.
for maybe, it's very hard to recall, 3 to 4 months. And then after that, I was qualified after the examination, and they, hey, you gotta take this foundation year. So I did 1 year in the foundation course, and then I attend the final exams in New Zealand. I think something to do with the NCQA, their education system, and I got offer from the uni after that. So I went to uni after that.
Okay. So when you were in uni, you started learning about designing.
Visual art and
arts.
design and a lot of, history in general and psychology. Something to do with design, yeah.
I see. So were there any challenges that you faced when you were in New Zealand? Challenges?
Yep, it's all challenges.
Can you talk more about those challenges?
I think the biggest challenge was I was obviously a person who had no idea about the things that I want to learn. At the same time, can barely understand what is written on the paper. So it's like you're in a maze solving puzzles with double amount of efforts.
Okay.
First thing is language, right? And the second thing is the study itself. A lot of people would, struggle even to learn those high-end academic stuffs, even if they speak fluent English, even if they can write or write, you know, like, so I would say the biggest challenge is to find a balance where I can learn at the same time, improve at the same time, while knowing that there are always something more difficult ahead of my journey. So I can't be scared, you know, I can't be like, oh, this is too difficult, I gotta go home. And it surprises me that I did not have too much homesick while I was there. Yeah,
I see. I can actually relate with your study because with your story, because me as well. Also, I'm learning in Chinese, and it's quite the same as you see, as you say.
Yeah.
And talking about also homesickness, I haven't actually felt that much, like being homesick or something, because it's like I just got a new house, new home. Yeah, I see your story. It's absolutely nice, and it's pretty interesting. So we were talking about the challenges that you faced, and then you were talking about the challenges about the language. You were also talking about you talked a little bit about homesick, that you didn't feel that particular thing. So I think we can move further with your story and going directly at the end of university. In high school. So when you finish university, when you finish university, is there, how do you see life then? Because the way I see life is we are studying in university, and then real life actually comes when you finish university. The day you finish with the graduation, that's when things actually start. And how did you manage then at that particular moment?
Yeah, I think I was lost a little bit, you know. I think I was living in a fantasy. Coming from an international background, have a lot of local friends. My classmates are nice, you know, we party very hard. Obviously we're into what we learn, but we had plenty of fun. And the reality is not like that. You're not supposed to have that much fun. And so it's like you're looking at a mirror, and the graduation day is when the mirror broke into pieces. And you realize, you know, and you sort of want to stop this motion happen, and you broke, you know, and the broken glasses just cut your fingers, and you know, you gotta bleed, and you feel that actual pain. And that's a great metaphor, but the real pain come from, you know, I gotta find a job to sustain myself. You know, my parents paid a lot of tuition fees, and what comes after that is the start of my career, right? You know, competing with local people and creative jobs is very difficult, and I can't even describe it, you know, with a quantification. You know, there's just, it's a rare thing for a Chinese national in a quite westernized country to compete with the local creatives.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
You know, that's one step beyond the previous struggle.
Oh yeah,
because you got to be good with all of those stuffs. And you got to be able to convince them, hey, why are you useful for our society? And I had that, you know, dumb buzz going on around 12 months. I wasn't, you know, able to find a job, an ideal job in 12 months time. And it only come, you know, after that period of sufferance that I find a place in the end. So yeah, uni graduation is the end of a story and the start of, I would say, true adventure.
I see.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And I was thinking about another thing, you know, because from a individual standpoint, I believe that every human being is supposed to pass through some stages, especially development stages. So one of those stages, I believe, is when you are in university, where you need to start developing yourself when it comes to your personality, understanding yourself and trying to understand the world. So I would like to ask you the question, when did you actually started to do that inner and outer adventure? Was it in university or after university, after the graduation?
Right at the end of the university.
Right at the end.
Yeah.
That's when you started your journey of inner understanding and outer understanding.
Yeah. It has everything to do with my study, because my interest in design at the time was autobiography and oral history. So what I did is I did a publication and a lot of, mixed media works for the purpose of self-exploration in terms of my heritage, cultural heritage, and and ancestral heritage. And it was at that time I starting to really look into the nature of identity, because before that I think I was living in a fantasy.
Yeah,
you go out, have some alcohol, have some nice feed, and you dance and have party, go visit your friends. Life is steady and comfortable. But as soon as I jump into that journey of question, hey, if I writing my story, what is looks like, what does this story look like, and where should I start? And then layer by layer I starting to really touch something I would call trauma. You're starting to see the pain that's really not part of your biological history, but cross-generational. It'll associate with the wider history and the wider society. I might not be the one who suffer it, but the story is passed down to me, because if you are opening that page up, you'll have to look back and say, wow, that's where my ancestors were.
Yeah.
And so, yes, at the end of the course I spent 6 months doing this. It did not finish. I was playing in a band as well at the time. At the same time, in that 12 months, I was doing the band, looking for jobs, struggling. Visa expiry date is coming closer, approaching to me, and the stress goes up, and the amount of cash that I have in the bank goes down. I put all of those reflections into my music, lyrics, my live performances. So it is a continuous journey from the end of uni, I would say. Yeah.
Well, by the way, I would like to say to everybody that he is also an artist and a musician, and I've just listened to one of his piece of music. It's absolutely incredible. It mixes modernism and Chinese history. Is absolutely awesome. So back to what we were saying. Back to what we were talking about. Yeah, I look at it and I see that we have two different standpoints, because you say that you were living in a fantasy when you were coming out of university, and that's when you saw actually what real life was, and that you had a life where we were going partying and doing all of that. Do you think that partying or this kind of life in a certain way helped you with what you are now, or was it a completely loss of time?
No, I would say the other way around. I think is a great helper, because you will get lost if you are addicted to the superficial elements to it, right? Alcohol, and a lot of people, they're addicted to drugs. So sex, drugs, rock and roll, that sort of lifestyle. But it wasn't the case for me. I think it was great opportunity for me to get amongst the local neighborhoods, to really have conversation with my classmates outside of the class, to see how other young people interact with other people. Without that environment, I would not be able to speak good English. I would not be able to, you know, to get comfortable in completely strange environment and, you know, just unleash my insecurity. You know, I'm not scared by strangers. I'm not scared by accidents, you know, and that all come from partying.
I see.
At least for me.
It's absolutely great as you're talking about that, because it reminds me about one thing in psychology that I was learning pretty recently, because my journey, it's not like yours. My journey is like, you know, those kind of children who study most of the time, they don't go out and stuff like that. So my journey is a little bit different from yours, but I do see now that as I'm evolving, I'm much more going now inside this particular way as you were, because there is a famous psychologist, Jordan Peterson, that I listen a lot to. He was talking about the development of the shadow, and that the shadow is everything that we repress. And one of the things, the three things that he was saying that people do repress is anxiety, aggressivity, and sexuality. Those are the things that they repress. And in my journey, that's where I'm finding myself. I've always been like that, repressing all of those things. But now I'm finding myself into a position where those things are supposed to come out now. And I believe this is one thing also that I really like, is like people that have been able to go doing the partying and all of that, if they come back to the right mind, they have a very great experience about how life is. They do have, because they were in places where all of those things that were supposed to be repressed actually came out. And it's something that is part of your personality. You start to accept it, and it defines who you actually are. And it's absolutely great. It's absolutely great that you were able to push that shadow and come back, because there are some people that go into the shadow and never come back.
I think that's another story. But then, just to add on to your stuff, your experience of getting repressed, either from the society or by yourself, by your own moral standards. I think in China, the society is like that. Especially, you know, I have a very practical example for you to understand this. Is we had military training, right? So when I was in primary school, we had this military training, and at the end of the training, we're supposed to have a bonfire party. So we had this bonfire set up in the school campus. We have those massive PA and speakers with bass music, you know, like dance music, right? And because of this, it's part of the military draw, or because it's part of the Chinese culture, you know, I was vibing. You know, as a kid, and I was a young athlete at the time, so very active, and I was unconsciously I was vibing with the music, and I was shaking my head, and my body goes with the flow, and the teacher's like, no, you shouldn't do this. But that was a bonfire party, and they were calling it a bonfire celebration, gala show, or whatsoever, right? See, you're supposed to dance with the bonfire. That was just my natural instinct. And that has nothing to do with, you know, teenager years, desires, and anything. It's just biological sort of unconscious driven behavior. And that's a memory that, you know, stay in my brain forever. I probably forgot most of the time that I had during that, you know, when I was 11 or 12 years old. But the reason I remember that is because I feel uncomfortable. I feel comfortable when I was vibing with the music. Now you shut me down. I just don't feel like I'm part of this, you know, environment. And when I was in New Zealand, I mean, partying and drinking and all that, it's just part of the culture. I think they naturally have this culture where no teacher gonna tell you to stop dancing. In fact, if you are the only one that vibe with the music, you might be a very talented dancer. You know, a teacher will be like, "Hey, you should become a dancer." But nobody told me. Nobody ever tell me that. but I dance. I really enjoy dancing. And it's rare, to see Asian people in that environment to just go hard. Even the people who grew up in New Zealand with an Asian background, I mean, their family thing, this cultural thing, societal suppression, is not a thing that only exists within the border, you see? It's a lifestyle. And yeah, I think even though we come from a different background, because of that, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I see.
Yeah.
Those are, you were talking about instincts. Those are things that are actually, those are the things that are making what we are, but most of the time they are things that we repress.
Yeah.
And because we repress them, the individuality that we are supposed to put out in the world, we don't put it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the individuality of one person, it's bad for the society. Nobody will see what we could actually be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, there's a lot of, like, I would say it, hypocrisy,
Yeah.
like, because you're trying to justify suppression with legit reasoning. At the same time, without being authentic with yourself, then your reasoning is probably not as legit. It's just blind, like blindness. Passing down this sort of violence, as I would say, is like sort of soft violence across generation. This generation grew up in that environment, and this instinct is manipulated and twisted, and it becomes another instinct. When your kid is vibing, and you be like, no, why are you doing this? Nobody else is dancing.
Yeah.
Why are you dancing? Like it becomes rules and regulations without legit reasoning. Yeah.
It's like you are lying, basically.
You're lying to yourself.
It's a lie.
And you want everybody else lying with you.
Yeah.
Like, you feel like you shouldn't be dancing. You're like, oh, we Chinese people, we're very reserved. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Like, I think you're just not, dealing with the reality.
Yeah.
You have a lack of experience in be together with yourself.
That's true.
Yeah.
What you say is absolutely true. It's absolutely true. It is. So you were talking about Immanuel Kant.
Yeah.
We're talking also about Carl Jung.
Yeah.
And talking about Carl Jung, I would say Carl Jung also, he really had a very big influence on me as well. He was bloody genius. Really smart. But I never read the book that you're talking about, the book about the mythologies, but I think it's a book that is very linked to your project, which is Gongzhen.
Yeah. Yeah.
About last time I saw the video about the dragon that you were creating using AI.
Yeah. That's the reverse story of the cartoon characters, right?
Yeah. That like what you were talking about, it just reminded me of that one. That's pretty interesting. So can you talk about after? I think it's better to do it like that. Like after that, you finish with your degree or finished. It's much more. After that, you finished with that discovery of yourself. You come out and you see yourself as being born again in a certain way.
Or I wasn't even born, and I was just born into the world.
Oh,
like I wasn't that conscious. Like it's like fantasy after another fantasy. Because my career, even though I did suffer, it was wonderful. I was lucky. I became award-winning. I got a senior role right after uni, and when most people are, struggling finding a junior job, and I was working on a senior position in New Zealand, getting paid, become a resident of New Zealand. That was kind of living in the dream kind of thing for a lot of people. I was running art festivals, curating art festivals and helping other people to put festivals together, playing a band, doing international tour as well, all of those things are, I would say a lot of them are driven by unconscious side of me, connected with, those kind of instinct, desires. Party for the sake of partying, have fun. But at that moment, that was detox. That was a process of detoxing and a process of clarifying purposes and how to be analytical with reality.
I see.
Yeah.
Talking about your experience of becoming conscious, I was actually thinking about that. I think it was maybe 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, because when I was pretty young, I was young and I used to read, but I never used to read things like philosophy. I remember I hated philosophy, especially when I was in high school. I was in high school, it was the last class. I hated philosophy. Every time that there was philosophy, I was among the first people to start sleeping. The teacher, he was always looking at me like, this guy. I was good in other subjects.
Yep.
I was pretty good in math, maybe chemistry, not so much in physics. The other ones, I was pretty good. I was a pretty good student, but philosophy, never. And I always had this sense that philosophy was something for people that are just too rational to admit to themselves that there is a greater power that exists.
Yep.
And I also received the influence of my culture, and the influence that I received is that everything is being put by God. And so whenever I was hearing somebody like Friedrich Nietzsche, he was saying God is dead, is like I wouldn't even think about it.
Yeah.
And I was saying, no, this guy he is lost.
Yeah.
This guy is absolutely lost.
Yeah.
But now when I find myself in situations where I'm reading a book that Friedrich Nietzsche has written, it's like it's a very great twist of reality.
Yeah.
It's like things just change in a certain way. And now I see that I've become much more conscious than when I was in high school. But I don't think that it's still complete. It's just like a partial level of consciousness. And it's like I'm still going through the journey. And it's very interesting because we look, both of us, we have Carl Jung that was there as an influence. And his work is absolutely great. But I think the whole point of that is just to help the person to be able to reach that high level of consciousness. I think this is the goal of philosophy, to be able to get to that higher level of yourself. And it's absolutely beautiful. So we're talking about your Gongzhen. What then made you to start creating this project? Because you had a good job, high salary, senior position in the company, you were organizing festivals. It's like the El Dorado. But why now stopping that and coming here in China?
Well, that's a few things there. Speaking of the job, I don't think I got highly paid. I think I did not. I deserve higher pay, but because I need a job and I need, to sustain my placement in New Zealand at that time, to sustain my other things, I have to work hard, and that's it. And I really want to pursue this dream to see if I put 100% in, how far can I go? Simple. There's nothing to do with the conventional sense of having a nice job and steady income. Nothing. And I was like this in the very beginning. I just don't care. And speaking of breaking away with it, it's like I find myself not part of the commercial environment, at least in that sort of commercial environment. I think my value and my vision, they are not promoted. I was just a great robot, a good machine. A good machine that is kind of creative, and I can be great for money making for other people's purposes. So yeah, that was a no for me, especially when I was doing music at the same time and trying to stay true to myself, regardless whether I was true or not, But Gongzhen is another thing. Gongzhen, the name came from my research in in uni. I actually published it, the abstract, in an international forum. And it was translated into Spanish and Portuguese. Only the abstract though. It was called Collaborative Vibration. So my intention was that if myself, a biological being, can combine different sort of vibrations, which means, moving images as some sort of vibrations, right? And sound as some sort of vibrations, and knowledges, then metaphor comes in, different schools of knowledge, and whether they're scientific knowledge or whether they're philosophical knowledge, musical knowledge, artistic knowledge, all of those things combined. Where can I go with all of those vibrations combined? So I was like, okay, that's pretty literal. That's collaborative vibration. And now I realize, because that intention, I realized maybe myself is not enough. You got collaborative vibration because I'm creating a vibration. After all, it's all in here. What if you get a lot of people and you get collaborative vibrations? And where do we have most of the people? For me, China got a lot of people. I mean, India will have more people. They're already having more people. But I don't speak Hindu and other languages. In Africa, you would have Nigeria, lots of people.
Yep.
But it's too far away from me. So I was like, okay, the only sensible and rational way to really promote where I'm going is in China. And I am, I'm fluent in Chinese, so why not? Time to go back home and actually do it. I never remove myself from the previous experiences. Everything I do, I guess, is it's the result of the previous experiences. It's kind of collaborative vibrations as well, right? So it's very philosophical. But Gongzhen is more technical than philosophical, I guess, because you need to generate value, actual value that has commercial potential at the same time, it's ethical for the wider society. And at the same time, I gotta, vibe with what I do. So I want to put all those things together and create a life. I built a new identity, but it's an empty shell. It doesn't matter who you are. At the end of the day, there's only a definition. And you need a lot of representation for that. I need actions to test out whether my identity is truly me, or I'm either far away from my, ideal version of myself, or I'm getting closer and closer. And Gongzhen is the vehicle. There's a star. I want to explore that star. Now I need to build a rocket. Now I need to find the fuel. I need to investigate and research further. So it's one step above my research.
I see your point about Gongzhen. For those who don't know, Gongzhen means resonance. Resonance. I come from a French background, so sometimes the pronunciation might be...
It's quite French, that word.
Resonance. Absolutely great. It's absolutely great. Yeah.
I mean, it can be a great thing. It can be chaotic, and it can be disastrous. If you have resonance on a bridge, it collapses. So it really, it requires a lot of careful tailorship. I gotta be extremely careful with what I do.
Yeah. So I think now we are going to go to the second part of this interview or this small podcast. We're going directly into philosophy.
Yeah.
So you were talking about Gongzhen as a philosophical idea and a metaphor, an abstract term. So I wanted to ask you about the use of God. But I think before talking even about that, but what will you define as God?
Yeah. So a God, I mean, as a word, as a metaphor, like any other word, and human language probably. But in this process, going back to the master thesis, right? When you talk about mythology, you can't get away the concept of God. You just can't.
Totally.
If you're not talking about that, then you're not talking about mythology. You're talking about fictional stories, because the difference is, do you feel something in you that's deeply hidden and that's unspeakable? Because if it's speakable with rational method, then you can already explain it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's because you can't, so you need stories, you need images, you need dragons and all that.
To be able to explain
to be able
that.
to express what I want to express. And that's the fundamental understanding of miscreation. Is it really doesn't matter about those representations. The craftsmanship, everything, of course, important. What's important is, what did you learn? What did you learn from, like, traumatizing experiences? What did you learn from struggles? What did you learn from whatever journey that is? Because if you're not learning, if you're not getting in touch with this deeply mysterious part of your life, then you're probably not going to create anything interesting. And for me, I was experiencing it, and it has a lot to do with my ancestry and an ancient word creation myth. So I was reading about, I was born in Inner Mongolia, and I have this, Chinese, Manchurian, Mongolian, all those backgrounds combined. And I read so much, like probably that much books. And one day, on one page, I saw a very interesting story. It was called Fights in Heaven. It was not the Christianity heaven or Islamic heaven or any, other religious. It was a shamanic, like a Jurchen peoples. So Manchurian word creation myth. There were nothing in the world. So this is the beginning of the story. Nothing in this world. Just void. All of a sudden, there's a droplet, a little bubble appeared. And then another bubble appeared. Like the Fibonacci numbers, divide, and like a piece of machine or automation, it's generate different bubbles, and one of the bubble became a goddess, and then another goddess, just bubbles, goddesses, and all of a sudden, one of the goddess turned into a devil. So you have bubbles, and goddess, and devil, and then until then, word after a lot of transformation, of course, there's a word with both the goddess and the devil, and but at the end of the story, sorry, I had to jump. It's a complicated story, but at the end of the story, both the goddess and the devil in that story are struggling. Because they all have their ideas about how to make the world better. And the devil is like, oh, maybe it's good to have ice. And the earth become a frozen piece of land. And the god is like, damn, I don't know how to deal with this, but it's pretty cold and everybody's dying, and the devil doesn't know how to do stuff. And there's a bird flying in. And the bird uses his beak to knock on the ice, and the sunshine comes through and melt the ice, this chaotic situation that the goddess and the devil created because they're fighting each other. And then you have life, because everything comes back. So it has a connection with histories of a frozen land, the little ice age human experience. It has God and goddess, but in the end, it wasn't them solved the problem. It was a bird. Very interesting perspective, right? That was the word creation myth that we had. It's called Fights in Heaven.
Interesting.
Very interesting stuff. So obviously, the funniest thing is me making connection with that bird has with the sort of bird metaphor, right? Was completely different to what the story is about, but I was actually experiencing a bird metaphor. There was a bird in New Zealand called quokka. In Maori language, it's called quokka. The English name is Bartel godwit. So it's a crazy bird because it can fly for 8 days nonstop. One go. All the way from New Zealand to China. And then from China to Alaska. And then from Alaska to New Zealand, like a triangle. They just go like this. So 10,000 kilometers without stopping. And you know where they're flying into? From New Zealand? They're flying into where I was, my ancestral home.
Oh, Nanjing?
No, I'm in the Bohai area, so northern, the northern China.
Okay.
Close to Korean Peninsula. So I was like, I was reading that word creation myth, but in my head, the bird is not that bird in the thing. The bird that really amazed me was the bird that flies from New Zealand to there. And so I was obsessed with the bird story because I think, it wasn't about the god. It wasn't about the goddess. It was actually life, like a nature-based metaphor that helped, the divine forces or the devil forces to find a solution or something else. It's a surprise. So for me, I stopped looking for the definition of God, but looking for information from metaphors, from the bird. And I think that old piece of miscreation is no longer that relevant, but it's also a great metaphor. Let's see. Bubble, a goddess, a devil, problems. So science is like that. Ignorance. Here we go. Something. It's a problem. I cannot solve that problem. I cannot solve that problem. I cannot solve that. All of a sudden, I solved that problem. But the reason why you solved that problem, some people say is because of God. Some people say because of, this method of doing things. But whatsoever, it goes like that.
And it originates from one.
Yeah, from that emptiness.
Yeah.
So emptiness is another story to talk about, right? But that's probably close. That's where the one God thing comes from. It's why is it a void? Why is there bubble coming from? But I cannot talk about that because in my research, how can you use words to describe anything beyond void? That's the end of discussion. Even in physics, even in religion, right? God says there is light. Well, you can't see stuff when there's a bubble because it's all void, and then there's light. You can see stuff, right? That's the beginning. But what's beyond that? I don't have a rational mind to say that I believe Immanuel Kant was like that. But because of my ancestral history, I pay attention to, those sort of stories. Otherwise, I will not pay attention to, right? I saw a bird. And at the same time, before that discovery, before me find out that bird is actually a crucial metaphor for my ancestors, I was already researching in that bird. I was like, well, that's so interesting because what it tells is that we humans don't quite know about a specific species, but we borrow it as a metaphor. Maori people said we followed that bird. They reckon that bird flight from their ancestral home. But guess what? They came from Alaska. I don't think the Maori people's ancestral home is in Alaska, right? And then they went to China. So everything happened because we put a satellite sensitive device onto that bird. We trace its past, right? So science come in, right? And we realize, holy shit, how can a bird fly like this 10 days nonstop? What sort of inspiration can you get from this bird? That becomes some question that has nothing to do with God at the moment, right? It becomes very pragmatic. So I was like, okay, I find a functionality for myth, and I find a direction to create my myth because we need an update. And that's my character. You see the personal myth thing. Okay, my personal myth has everything to do with this bird. My cartoon character has everything to do with this bird. You see? Bird. The cartoon bird, like, that's my metaphor. And I'm going to create stories and combine the word and every knowledge to do with that metaphor. And eventually I actually learned so much.
Interesting.
And that's
Because as I'm hearing you, it's like you are trying to give the definition of God on your own point of view through this work.
yeah.
The way I'm seeing it, because you were talking about that bird that goes from Alaska to Australia, and after that goes to China, and it goes through this triangle. Because I was looking at that, it means that the people that are in Alaska, they will have a different definition of that particular bird. The people that are in Australia will have a different definition, and the people also that are in China will have a different definition.
Yeah.
So it means that all of them will have a definition, but the whole definition is like when they put all of them together. So
what is it?
So now your story through Gongzhen is like giving your own point of definition about the reality.
And that bird inspires me, right?
Uh-huh.
Without looking at the bird, it's like, oh, you talk about nationality. Is the bird having a nationality? I go there, hey, I'm Chinese now. Here, I'm indigenous too.
Interesting.
You're not.
Yeah.
You're like, and where's this bird coming from? What's the ancestral line for bird? When did the bird, they evolved from dinosaurs? Like, when did it happen? And all that things, I was trying to look for a story that can make me happy, to have a calm mind, to know more about my ancestry. Now I'm no longer me. I'm putting myself in the image of this bird. And at the end of the day, I don't think that matters that much no more, because you go to different places and you basically, to simplify it in an abstract way, is that this is not human-centric. So this metaphor is a tool for me to remove my human identity by being with it, by creating stories, by try to think, I don't think I can remove my human identity at all, but I think it's a great point of view. The word is not human-centric.
I see your point.
You see it? Like, the word is not human-centric. And when you think about God from a human-centric point of view, it's dangerous. Because you're defining it. But is it human-centric? That's another thing. The danger of thinking that humans are the only people that receive the love and appreciation, or the care from this creator, or it's completely non-human-centric. It just, whether it exists or not, whether this bubble thing, this void thing, what is it? And what is actually beneficial for human? I think the latter. I think non-human-centric. And that's very similar to the Chinese. The Tao is like, how can you know? Like, and back to Immanuel Kant with pure rational mind. How the heck can you know? They're like, no, I can't. But I know one thing for sure. I know everyone are wrong about this bird until we put that satellite devices and holy crap, they actually go that far. Because how can you tell though? You're not following that bird, right? So now we follow that bird, we realize here's the triangle.
That's very interesting. I was very recently, I was reading one chapter of a book, and it was talking about the way that people twist reality from their own perspective. So reality presents to you as a set of things that we know. But now people sometimes, they have the tendency of trying to manipulate it so that it could fit their own will. And then the person was giving the example of politicians, for example, where they will use manipulation, or they will use lies to convey a certain type of information. So they will lie in a certain way. And in doing that, it will bring them maybe the favor of the people that are listening to them. And in that sense, they are twisting the actual reality. So the way I see it also is like scientism is just a way of trying to twist what the reality actually is to just fit your personal benefits. But now it's like some people sometimes may not be conscious of that. It's like you are twisting reality every single day, but you are not conscious of what you are actually doing. Yeah,
it's a bit like, so bring it back to philosophy, it's almost like if you read the last chapter of The Republic, Plato and all the other, Greek philosophers, they critiqued on the myths of ancient Greek, and the artists, they think, oh, what are you doing is you are a very fluent craftsman at mimicking other people. You're not doing anything original and critical, but copying what it has been done, and you make it like a sort of emotional attachment. You know, you make a forced story, and you spread this story so the young people and the people who are not trained in a critical setting to fool them into certain beliefs, and that's dangerous. I mean, that's very far away from science itself, right? And for example, like we have this massive debate about genetic modification, whether can human consume genetic modified organisms, whether it's actually healthy or whether there will be a long-term, consequences. And from a scientific point of view, of course, there will be debates going on. But if you take advantage of this and just say, hey, science says this is all good, there's no bad negative side of this, and then all of a sudden you're saying this because you're putting all those evidence together to benefit you, then is it morally acceptable? Big part of it in the advertising and in the agriculture sector.
I think one of the reasons also why people do that is it might be because they may not actually be seeking for the ideal, which is truth, which can be truth, which can be beauty. They're not actually seeking for the ideal, because if you are actually seeking for the ideal, you will come to notice it at a certain point of time. I think you will come to notice it at a certain point of time that you need what you have is not actually what defines everything. I think
that's vulnerability, though. Like, not many people would submit to their own vulnerability.
Yeah, it's putting yourself in a vulnerable position.
Yeah,
that's true.
You kind of have to when you're doing scientific research or even experiencing a personal myth. You can't say like, hey, my ancestor was the greatest warrior and therefore I am. Therefore, they conquered so much, I need to conquer and just copy that story. It's the other way around, is to accept that it's not the way. There must be new ways. There must be new definitions.
I think it's possible. It's possible to do it, even though I don't think it's not all the statements maybe that you might make them prove that they are truthful.
Yeah.
I think mathematically speaking also, you can't prove, there are some things that you can't prove that they are true or not.
You just can't.
Yeah, but the discovery of trying to prove whether they are true or not will lead you to discover a lot of different things about mathematics.
Yeah.
And I think that's how they do the discoveries, right? It's like in trying to find the truth about something, you find other truths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like even in mathematics, it's like back then you have completely different orientation in putting the series all together. And someone else come in and say, hey, I'm going to introduce this new concept to your mathematicians. And then they got rejections. But then 200 years later, that becomes a new, objective reality. Like set theory, right? Like people back then think this is pure evil. How can you have stuff like that? It's just not acceptable. Back then, there's no negative numbers. There's no odd numbers. But it becomes all virtual numbers, and all that kind of representations. They emerged in this sort of process as you just described. And I think the answer does not matter. It's like really it doesn't matter because you're missing out so much experiences in that process of approaching. And I don't think it's something you can avoid, this journey of exploration. If you're avoiding that, at the same time saying that I'm actually closer to truth or God or whatsoever, then you're probably not.
Yeah.
You're pretending that you are, because you're not starting your story yet as a living creature, like you're giving up this opportunity to live to the full extent. The full is to really unleash your fate. I mean, if the word is determined, then are you determined to be lazy and not, care about possibilities? And I don't want to spend too much time thinking about those type of things. It's something you have to think about. But when reality kicks in, then just go with the flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we are going to look a little bit at the different methods of finding knowledge and truth. And this is one question that I would like to ask you. How do you then find knowledge and truth, to your opinion?
So if truth is something we can't fully grasp, and if knowledge is something is needed, then I'd like to combine this approaching exploration towards truth and the gathering process of knowledge. I like to combine them with my area of interest. I like to turn them into initiatives which are fun and interesting to do. Like coming back to my master degree, the research I did in that period of time, it was essentially a project-led exploration, right? I have a very clear direction. I want to create a new myth, and this new myth will benefit my personal growth. So it's a personal myth. And by doing so, I go to so many different directions. I have to learn mathematics, to learn the fundamental of storytelling, to learn different metaphors, to learn, everything to do with the bird and its environment and everything, right? By doing so, I ended up creating paintings, drawings, animations, and scripts. Those things are no longer story themselves, even though for the outsider, they look at it, oh, that's just another story. They are a hyperlink of memories. So when I look at those things, I don't think about the story. I think about the memory to do with the process of creating those stories. And those knowledge are remembered, through those hyperlinks.
It's like totems, right?
Yeah, so they are totems. So I think for every single one, human being, who speaks and who are capable of reading and think in a critical way, this is a great way. This is probably the best approach. Yeah, rather than saying, "Hey, I need to do research in physics, and I only concentrate that area." For most people, it's not necessarily needed.
Yeah,
but you can approach to that area by creating your own initiative. You want to be the greatest football player. Doesn't mean that you can't learn physics, right? It probably helps you a lot if you learn physics. And it helps a lot if you learn science. Sports science is very empirical based, and it involves chemistry, a lot of chemistry and biology. So look, you will be the greatest football player if you also know all those things. Why don't you combine your training, combine your day-to-day education with this greatest initiative you have? So the foundation, like you said, the foundation is your own interest, and that's the definition of your life. The greatest starting point of this exploration, rather than, getting spoon-feeded.
I see your point. It's like for you to be able to get the knowledge and for you to be able to get the truth, first of all, you must have that particular interest of finding it in your own way. So if it was like somebody who maybe tries to understand how can I study much more better? So the person will say, okay, let me try to think a little bit over it. Okay, there's this particular thing that I'm supposed to do. There's this thing that I don't really understand well. Okay, I'm going to try to search in that particular area. Okay, let me see if I can find something that can actually help me with that study problem that I have. And so that's how you can actually reach truth and knowledge.
If you like computer games, and at the same time you're suffering mathematics, I think there's a way to combine the two to help you out. I think it's the acknowledgement, this is for the educators, I guess. It's like, if they're not creative enough, or if they are not open enough or vulnerable enough to accept the fact that informations are interconnected, then it's probably not going to be a reality. But if you accept the fact that information are interconnected, then I don't see a differences in things no longer, especially when informations are everywhere. Reading history, learning things about a bird, combined with designing a story, for the bird, or design a piece of wood, like a carved sculpture. Those things they goes together, and it takes time and skills to craft this journey. But then I think that's the direction of human education. Project lead, cross-disciplinary, cross-interdisciplinary, action-based study.
And so it's not also something that we see a lot in our education system, right?
Yeah. So that's the whole point, mythology back then. And, you have those shamans, they know herbal knowledge to do with the herbs, and how to, how to hunt and stuff. That's all passing down information to the future generation, right? So it's just that how we create better experiences for the kids to grow. A lot of people, when they are 20 years old, because the journey they had was not pleasant, they gave up this opportunity to explore through the information that's in front of them. I mean, that's the biggest trouble we had. A lot of people abandoned their intellectual side of, life. They avoided information because they think those are for the exams.
Yeah.
And that's
your point.
Yeah, that's just the reality of, like a godwit. There's no longer a godwit, because the bird finds its safe net and stay there forever. But by default, it's born to fly. And the journey is tough, There could be stones, you could be dead. But you gotta take it.
Yeah, that's how life is.
That's what life is. And if I mean, I'm doing it. I think I'm setting up this example for myself, and motivate myself, because I had this bird. Like, for other people, there are different metaphors. Could be elephant, could be lions, could be a plant, could be the sun, could be anything. It's free for people to understand. As long as they realize information are connected, then why not?
Interesting. All right. I think we're going to stop here for today.
Cool.
It was really good having you on this particular platform, and I just hope that Gongzhen will be able to fly high. So
Thank you.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we are going to see each other in the next episode. So we say goodbye. Peace.